Hello, my name is Jovina Effendy. I am from the National University of Singapore, and today I'll be presenting my research proposal titled Cognitive Offloading as a Mediator of the Relationship Between the Types of Large Language Model User Interactions and Critical Thinking Abilities of Undergraduate Students in Southeast Asian Universities. My presentation will cover five main parts: the introduction, literature review, hypothesis, methodology, and expected outcomes. With the rapid integration of large language models into academic settings, concerns have emerged regarding their potential impact on students' thinking processes. While large language models can provide powerful cognitive support, there is growing debate over whether reliance on these tools may undermine critical thinking through excessive cognitive offloading. Existing research on large language model use and critical thinking presents mixed findings. Some studies suggest that large language models can support learning by reducing unnecessary cognitive load, in line with the supplement hypothesis, while others indicate that over-reliance on these tools may negatively affect memory, reasoning, and critical thinking, in line with the substitute hypothesis. Based on existing literature, three major gaps can be identified. First, the role of large language model user interaction type has been largely overlooked, despite evidence suggesting that different interaction types are associated with different learning outcomes. Second, findings on the relationship between large language model use and critical thinking remain inconsistent, with limited research examining underlying mechanisms such as cognitive offloading. Third, there's a lack of experimental research conducted in non-Western educated, industrialized, rich democratic contexts, particularly in Southeast Asia. This study seeks to address these gaps by isolating interaction type as an experimental variable and examining whether cognitive offloading acts as a mediating mechanism linking large language model interactions to critical thinking performance. The research question of this study is, how does cognitive offloading mediate the relationship between the type of large language model user interaction and critical thinking abilities among undergraduate students in Southeast Asia? To address this question, the study proposes the following hypotheses. The null hypothesis states that the type of large language model user interaction does not affect critical thinking abilities of undergraduate students in Southeast Asia, and cognitive offloading does not mediate this relationship. The alternative hypothesis states that cognitive offloading significantly mediates the relationship between large language model user interaction type and critical thinking abilities. Regurgitative and procedural interactions will result in higher cognitive offloading and lower critical thinking scores, while augmentative and constructive interactions will result in lower cognitive offloading and higher critical thinking scores. The study will follow a true experimental mixed method design. A true experiment design was chosen to establish causality between independent and dependent variables. The mixed method design incorporates a pre-post test comparison of participants' critical thinking scores to eliminate effects of pre-existing differences, and a between subject design in comparing the effect of large language model user interaction to minimize practice and carryover effects when participants are exposed to multiple interaction types. The target population of the study is full-time undergraduate students studying in Southeast Asian universities. A volunteer sampling method will be used to ensure participants' full commitment throughout the length of the study. Interested volunteers will have to fill a screening questionnaire to confirm eligibility criteria, including enrollment status, English language proficiency, and large language model use experience. Participants will then be randomly allocated into one of the 5 experimental groups. The latest version of ChatGPT, GPT 5.2, will be used as a large language model throughout the duration of the study to ensure consistency and control for large language model related variability. All participant interactions with the large language model will be collected by the researchers with informed consent for the purpose of content analysis. All participants will be provided with the same stimulus essay on the topic of ethics of animal testing to minimize effects of prior knowledge. Cognitive offloading will be operationalized through 2 behavioral indicators. The first indicator is generativity ratio, defined as a proportion of AI-generated content relative to participant-generated content in the essay submitted by the participants. And the second indicator is a self-report measure of their reliance on large language models, measured through a questionnaire at the end of the analysis task. Critical thinking abilities will be measured using the Watson-Glaser Critical Thinking Appraisal, a standardized assessment widely used to evaluate core critical thinking skills, including inference, recognition of assumptions, deduction, interpretation, and evaluation of arguments. The procedure begins with participant recruitment and screening. Participants will be recruited through email announcements sent by university administrators. They will receive consent forms by email and will have to attend an in-person session where they will be briefed and asked to take a baseline critical thinking assessment using the Watson-Glaser test. After that, participants will be randomly assigned into one of the 5 groups. All participants will be assigned a 1-week essay analysis task, with experimental groups using the large language model according to their assigned interaction style. Guidelines and sample prompts will be provided to ensure participants understand how they are expected to interact with the large language model. At the end of the task, participants will be given a self-report questionnaire to measure cognitive offloading, and this data will be corroborated with the generativity ratio of their analysis outputs. Participants will then complete a post-intervention critical thinking assessment using the Watson-Glaser test. And finally, they will be fully debriefed and given the option to withdraw their data if they wish to do so. Data will be analyzed using one-way ANOVA to compare changes in critical thinking across groups, and mediation analysis to test whether cognitive offloading explains the relationship between interaction type and critical thinking outcomes. Prior to the start of the study, participants will be asked to read and sign a consent form which includes principal information about the study. In the consent form and briefing sessions, participants are informed that participation is completely voluntary and that they may choose to withdraw from the study at any point of time without facing any penalties. Slight deception will be used in the study to mask the true aim and prevent demand characteristics. However, the true aim will be revealed at the end of the study during the debriefing session. To ensure confidentiality and anonymity of the participants, each participant will be assigned a unique identifier code at the beginning of the study for the purpose of data tracking and protecting personal identity. Any personal data will be discarded within 3 days from the start of the study. Participants may feel stressed during the completion of the Watson-Glaser Critical Thinking Appraisal. However, the stress levels should not exceed beyond daily stress levels or stress levels during exams. While no direct benefits will be experienced by the participants, results of the study may potentially benefit the wider student population by providing insights into how large language models can be integrated into education for enhanced learning. It is anticipated that augmentative and constructive interactions will be associated with lower cognitive offloading and improved critical thinking outcomes, while regurgitative and procedural interactions will show the opposite pattern. Theoretically, these findings would help reconcile conflicting results in literature by demonstrating the effects of large language model use on cognition depend on how the tools are used. Practically, the study may inform evidence-based guidelines for integrating large language models into education in ways that support rather than undermine critical thinking development. One limitation of the proposed study is that cognitive offloading is measured using behavioral and self-reported measures, which only provide indirect evidence. Future studies should consider using physiological measures such as EEG or fMRI to corroborate behavioral and self-report measures. The study also only focuses on short-term changes in critical thinking, which may not fully capture long-term effects, since critical thinking tends to be relatively stable over time. Additionally, volunteer sampling may introduce self-selection bias, and while focusing on Southeast Asian undergraduates addresses a gap in the literature, findings may not be generalizable to other populations. Future results could use longitudinal designs with broader samples and incorporate brain imaging methods to better understand how cognitive offloading develops over time. In conclusion, the study seeks to clarify the relationship between large language model use, cognitive offloading, and critical thinking by focusing on interaction type as a key explanatory factor. By adopting a rigorous experimental design and addressing underrepresented populations, this research aims to contribute both theoretically and practically to ongoing debates surrounding AI in education. Thank you.